Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk. Thank you kindly for joining us. We're live in Charlottesville, across Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world, presented by Yes Realty Partners and Yes Team Realtors. We're powered by Intrastate Pest and Service Companies. Today's show, I was frankly really excited for. I woke up a little extra early today. There's two gentlemen on set, and no, it's not Keith Smith, but two gentlemen on set that I enjoy following and reading their content quite a bit. If you know me, you know I'm a news junkie, and the two guys that we're about to bring on create a ton of compelling content for this community. And for those of us that love reading compelling content, having them in studio and on set get you kind of excited. So Judah Wickower, why don't we go to the studio camera first? We'll welcome the distinguished gentleman to the show.
I got thrown in the gentleman mix. Thank you very much.
Hello, my friend.
How you doing? You know, I was going to call this a stakeholders roundtable, but I think I just twisted it around that we're going to call it a content producer. Or some
hashtag content slinger. Is that your hashtag there, Neil
content
Williamson?
slinger.
Let's go Hollywood Squares and welcome Neil and Sean. That's your go-to hashtag, right?
It is a go-to hashtag.
And the seats thing, right?
Seats available and content slinger. I believe Mr. Tubbs may have coined content slinger about 3 years ago.
But based on the work that you were doing. So let's be fair on that one.
All right. So no plagiarism here, right?
Oh, no. I think it's actually, we put out a lot of content. You have to have people find it somehow.
So questions and comments already coming in. We'll get to those. They're actually for Sean here. Before we do, why don't we let you finish your preamble, my friend?
Preamble?
Yeah, your preamble.
I thought we were going to call it a monologue. But then again, my jokes are kind of lame. But I'm going to try to channel my inner Neil Williams here in this particular show. But let's take a brief moment and introduce our two guests for the folks that maybe watching doesn't know. So I'm going to let you tackle that and introduce our two guests. And then I think we're just going to kick it off, maybe talk comprehensive plan or whatever rolls off the top of our heads.
And that's what Bill McKenzie is asking us to talk about on Facebook. We'll get to this, Bill. Why don't we start with this guy, Sean Tubbs, an award. I'm gonna embarrass you a little bit. An award-winning journalist.
I paid for those.
A man
He
who
paid for it.
a man who knows the community inside and out. A man who loves public transportation. A man that loves maybe a cold beverage on the downtown mall. A man that grinds and works really hard. Sean Tubbs.
Some of those are true, maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything, really.
Who's Sean Tubbs?
This month, watching the comprehensive plan in the city of Charlottesville, and people might not know what that is. There's no quick vote happening on this, so just to make sure we can caution, we're at a time with this process. If you don't know the process, this is the time to know it, and don't panic. There's a time for conversation at this point, and that's hopefully what I can help you with and what we can all help with as we think about what the future of Charlottesville is going to be.
The president of Town Crier Productions.
Yes, I started a company last year to essentially be the umbrella company, just very similar to what you did, Jerry.
I love it.
In order to sort of, do what I love to do, which is to write about this community and to try to ask questions and, to try to promote my bland neutrality to anybody who will pay me.
Sean Tubbs is good people. Bill McKenzie, just share the show.
It's the best deal out there, right?
You're a member.
I'm a member. It is literally the best deal out there, except for Neil Williams' content. Trying to make sure I've got everybody equally balanced. Mm-hmm. But I do have to say, awesome mustache, brother.
Well, thank you. No, that was another thing. I mean, we haven't had to wear masks since we've been wearing masks, and so I figured I would try something different and kind of like it.
Those are the handlebars, not a mustache, right?
This, I'm not entirely sure, but I am thinking it's not too early. If you do subscribe, 50% of the proceeds does go to mustache wax. So I'm going to enter competitions. And you're going to need a bigger camera to get the whole frame of the whole thing when we get there.
So I've had this mustache since 1985. You actually use mustache wax?
No, but I read this. I watched a documentary on Salvador Dali recently, and it talked all about his mustache. So I'm impressed. I think this actually could be the new growth industry for Charlottesville.
I think people want to talk about comprehensive plan. Off on the mustache.
There's a comprehensive plan for this mustache.
Sean Tubbs is on fire right now. Let's get Neil Williamson in, who also has. I'm the only one without facial hair in this room right now. I feel like I disappointed you guys today.
We'll get you one of those things for the next show.
Yeah, I've worn those for a show. How about Neil Williamson? A little intro, my friend.
Hi, I'm Neil Williamson. I'm the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. I've had the opportunity to work with Sean over the last 17, 18 years in different capacities. I will say that one of the things that you kind of slid by, the fact that he was watching a documentary on Salvador Dali just speaks to the breadth of knowledge that this person has.
I had to Google who that was. I'm just saying.
Well, have you ever seen Sean Tubbs karaoke at Rapture?
I have
on the
never
downtown mall?
seen that.
Soon you'll be able to do so
That
again.
is a sight to be seen. I have seen that happen.
Oh, wow, you've seen that?
How many times have you done that?
I was really starting to gear up to do it a lot more before the pandemic hit.
I've seen you do it once.
It was it's fun. I think that those are the types of experiences I think that I'm looking forward to, those communal experiences where I'm bringing my own microphone from now on, though.
Why? Because of
just in case.
Okay, just
Why not?
in case. All right, so here's where we're at. So Bill McChenzie, he says there are meetings this weekend for comments on the city's land use plan and rezoning and the elimination of single-family homes. We got Steven saying, guys, the comp plan. Why aren't more people talking about the damn comp plan?
Well, that's what we're going to do today.
Should we begin just with an open-ended, broad stroke? Where we stand with the comp plan?
I think before we do that, for the sake of the folks that may not know what a comprehensive plan is, I've heard Sean has a great ability to explain what it is. So, Sean, we're going to hand it off to you and explain to the folks that are not in this sphere like we are, what exactly is a comp plan, what it does, and what is it intended to achieve.
Sure. Well, Virginia law, and I'm sure the law in many other states, requires localities to come up with a comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission specifically to, I don't have the quote in front of me, but for the physical development of a particular community. And these are required to be updated every 5 years. It's important to realize that we're already living underneath the direction that previous plans have made in Charlottesville, in Albemarle, in Fluvanna, and those can always be changed and shifted. But so this is things like what are, and it informs zoning. It's let me just say this very clearly at the beginning. The comprehensive plan is not the zoning. The two are very related, but it is not the case. The plan dictates what changes might happen in the future. But the comprehensive plan is not just that. It's also the boring parts, which is the chapters with objectives and goals and strategies. So things such as, so ideas end up in comprehensive plans and then get implemented eventually. But right now, what people are concerned about is this future land use map. And we are currently in year 5 or 4, depending on how you count it, for this comprehensive plan rewrite. There was a previous attempt to go through this in 2018 that kind of got to right where we are right now. So we're at that point now where people are sort of, after the pandemic, this process is now happening. The city has hired a consultant for about $1 million to oversee this whole process. It began with the adoption of an affordable housing plan. Now we're at the comprehensive plan thing, and there's this big map, and anybody should go online and take a look at this map, and there might be a link somewhere in the chat or something, and see where it is. But also keep in mind that there's no vote on this until at least July, I think, or even before that. So, but I strongly recommend that people just go into this with an open mind, look at things, hear what people who are disagreeing with you, hear what they're saying, and let's see if we can figure out a way to come up with, because it should not be a fight.
So there's, thank you, Sean. There's a couple links that we'll be dropping into the feed to include an interactive map, that land use map, which is a really great tool. Neil, the way I tend to explain the comprehensive plan, it's a plan. It's a non-obligatory document. This does not say you must do this. The obligatory portion of it is the zoning, and sometimes there's a disconnect, right, between the comprehensive plan and the zoning. You want to talk a little bit about that disconnect and why is it there?
Sure. First and foremost, I always use the words aspirational in describing a comprehensive plan. It's who we want to be. It is the idea that the community has decided we want to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's an aspirational goal. Then there are strategies below that goal to how we achieve that goal. Whether you agree or disagree with those aspirational things, this is the time to get involved. There is, generally speaking, and I've said this in previous sessions, nothing happens without a willing property owner. In Virginia, it's very rare, though it does happen some, for a proactive rezoning by government. It happened in downtown Crozet about 10 years ago now. But a proactive rezoning is when the government says to the property owner, we want to rezone your land. That's different than when a property owner comes forward and says, I want to rezone my land for a higher use, and it fits the comprehensive plan. Well, one would think if that was the case, you could check a box and say, yes, it fits, and on you go. But there are conditions that go along with that rezoning, generally speaking, usually called proffers, that the communities can put on things. And what happens is if those proffers or conditions become too high, it doesn't happen. If it doesn't pencil out, it doesn't happen. And so what does that mean? That means your aspirational goal, your aspirational land use map doesn't occur, and you don't become who you want to be.
So when I have conversations with the general public, folks that really aren't in this field like the four of us are, and there's always this struggle. Well, I don't understand. The comprehensive plan said we want this, but this never happened. And
Aspirational is a good word for that.
Perfect word for that. Right. And then I always would ask the question, why is that the case?
Well, I think if you can look at some examples of where the aspirations might have come true. If you look at Charlottesville, the 2001 comprehensive plan called in theory for us to start planning on corridors in the city and to build denser on corridors. In 2003, there was a rezoning. So if you've ever asked, why are all those big buildings on West Main Street? It's because it was in a comprehensive plan first, followed by the zoning, and then that allowed builders to come in and basically build what was mostly by right. Which is the key word here. The developer wants to be able to go in and have leave it up to chance as little as possible, because there's millions of dollars riding on a lot of these things. And so by right developments are what they want. The whole plan of where we are now is this idea is that do we want to do a comprehensive rezoning in the city to upzone? In some places that might make sense. I should disclose, I am a property owner. That's an interesting conversation. I don't know what the answer is for me. But I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is that do we want that future land use map to match the zoning? And I think there's lots of people who have a stake in that fight.
But wait, Sean, it's not a question of if. The consultant has been hired to rewrite the comprehensive plan, exactly, and then the same consultant to subsequently rewrite the zoning to follow the comprehensive plan.
That's exactly right.
What that rezoning looks like is what's being discussed. There will be, or it'll be a default on contract, a rezoning happening in 2 years. That
well, that's assuming the city council adopts it.
No,
right?
if the city, whatever the city council is required to adopt something.
Correct. That's exactly.
The state code reads that the comprehensive plan must be reviewed every 5 years. Some localities actually just review it, and they say, "I'm good." Rock on. Yeah. And that it has to go through a planning commission, and then it goes through the
let's talk
board.
about that, Neil, because there is a possibility that could happen, right? Just let's paint the picture here. We spent $1 million, we meaning the city, has spent $1 million. They can go through this whole process, and at the back end of it, city council will go and say, okay, I'm good with the old one. Is that a possibility at this point?
Well, at this point, I don't think that's as much a possibility, but it is a possibility. Elections matter.
Yep.
And so you will have a new council, not a new majority, but you'll have a new council. When they get to the comp plan adoption, would be my guess. Yeah. Maybe not. It depends how quick it moves through. They've already adopted a new affordable housing plan that will likely benefit from additional rezoning, but nothing one council does will force another council to do anything. And it's important to recognize all of these things are iterative, and it is how it moves forward. But Sean's point about the meetings this weekend, the plan, the CVillePlansTogether.com, all of that is critically important to understanding the process for how this world-class city is going to develop.
Yes, and if I could just real quick, just a comparative tone that sort of illustrates this idea that the comprehensive plan is advisory, whereas the zoning is law. Let's just move for a quick second to Albemarle County, where next week there may or may not be a ruling in a case against the Board of Supervisors, where the supervisors' vote was based on a comp plan that said that a special use permit was required in order to have a gas station at exit 129. The Tiger Fuel Company wanted to have that happen.
The Black Cat Road?
This is the Black Cat Road one. And so that was a 3-3 vote, which ended up being a denial in effect. there was a lawsuit that had been filed previously about that. So next week we might get some local precedent on what the comprehensive plan actually does. I will say there is one thing in the comprehensive plan draft that is, to Neil's point about committing a future council. If you put a $10 million commitment to affordable housing in a comp plan, is that legally binding or is it morally binding? And what happens if the
Or is
city's...
it aspirational?
Or is it aspirational? And I think
those
that's
not the same thing?
some people. Well, I think that right now there's a lot of people putting flyers out in neighborhoods that just have such misinformation about the process that's happening. They're saying the council wants to upzone. Well, we're not at that point yet. And also, too, my next story will sort of detail the last webinar where the consultants were much more clear to say that, okay, one of the scary things to a lot of people was that the map, all the yellow, which is where a lot of single-family residential, suddenly the legend underneath it, that's what tells you what color says what, said that you can have up to 3 units. But then the consultants also said, well, that might not happen in all places because this is Charlottesville. It's very hilly. You can't build everywhere as much as you might like to. And so really, as I've said, if I had a way to change all of this, the zoning is so much more important at the end of the day than the comprehensive plan. And I think that sometimes in this community, we overly fixate on that future land use map when we can review it again in 5 years, potentially.
So in our world, it's a business plan, right? In essence, it's a business plan. This is what aspirational. This is our business plan set up. And as time moves on, your policies and your procedures and your budgets and all that kind of stuff, tweak it a little bit. But that's
different than a business plan. With a business plan, there's more institutional memory or consistency in players. The fact that there's going to be 2 new folks on the dais in November, or January 1, is a wrinkle that a business doesn't have to deal with.
Well, that's exactly right,
And that's what he was saying.
That's exactly right, and I was, my train of thought, I was going to go exactly that, where you and I can write a business plan as just 2 people. Now it's a whole region, but 100% right. What's more than likely going to happen is we possibly might have 2 new people on the dais. And that's 2 out of 5, and that could swing this thing in a completely different direction.
Big time.
Come November. That's why, and we had a couple of topics for today. Elections was one of them, and to use Mr. Williams' famous saying, "Elections matter." Let's talk about that. Why do elections matter in this particular case?
Well, in this particular case, elections matter because people fixate on the national election. We're Virginia. We like elections so much we have them every year. And the local elections have much more to do with what happens to you than the national election. Really an understanding of where people stand on all the topics and how they interact with you. We posted a story this morning talking about spending TOT dollars, transient occupancy tax dollars in Greene County to pave the parking lot for the visitor center. Now, the question is that an appropriate use of TOT dollars that are supposed to promote tourism? Well, if a tourist gets to the parking lot and it's raining and it's gravel and they don't get out and they don't stop in Greene County, well, maybe you could argue that's a good use. But those are clearly your dollars, well, in this case, tourist dollars, but in your community being allocated. It's important to know that when you talk about affordable housing on the local level and you talk about dedicating $10 million annually to affordable housing, what does that mean? There's a project that's moving forward right now about right of counsel for tenants. Now, on the surface, the proponents of this idea, it makes perfect sense. You should have counsel because you're being charged with something. In Virginia, you can't be charged with that unless you don't pay your rent. Okay, what is your defense? I didn't pay my rent. Are you saying you did pay your rent and it wasn't allocated? No. Then what is this money being spent for? Could that money be better spent on rental assistance?
Sure.
Would that $300,000 be better spent to keep people in their homes rather than paying 3 lawyers to go and say, yes, they didn't pay their rent?
What are we going to do now?
What are we going to do now?
Yeah.
It's an open question,
Sure.
but it happens at the local level. And Sean and I have spent 17, 18 years in these meetings watching every one of the people that are elected to local office want to make the community better. I have never met anybody run for local office that wanted to mess up the community.
Absolutely.
There are lots of different ways to do that, and every citizen has an opinion about the best way to do that. The best way to impact local politics is to vote and to be engaged.
So I've been sitting in those meetings since '87, and I've always believed and still believe all politics is local, period. It's local. Anything above local, it's great fodder for conversation over a cocktail, but the local politics is what makes a difference. And we talk about this on the show all the time. There are wonderful ways to get involved, right? We're going to put some links to review this weekend. There's reading these two gentlemen's work because they're at these meetings all the time, so you can get yourself educated. But you need to get involved at the local level because all politics are local, and local politics makes a huge difference. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, well, it's also interesting. It's also your community. I mean, if you want, so an interest I have in doing the work I'm doing now is tracking infrastructure projects. How do we get those built? Because that's something that different communities, I'll be very polite here, different communities have different levels of success in being able to deliver on that infrastructure. I think that going back to the through line in all of this is that there's a lot of people who think that Charlottesville should have more population. And some of the individual projects come down to, this is a neighborhood. In Fry Spring, for instance, there's a potential for a project that the Planning Commission wants to be denser than one of the proposals. Without getting into the numbers, I think they wanted to double it. But the reality is that there's only so many people you can get through there in a car, and that how can we guarantee that the infrastructure is going to be there before that development is built? And I think that sometimes communities can do that well. Sometimes it'll take them 10 to 15 years to catch up, and that's what we see in Crozet. And that's where many of the concerns of people in Crozet, as they go through their comprehensive plan update, in that case it's a small area plan called the Crozet Master Plan. But yes, everything is local. But also too, I think that my hope in this process is that people will get involved with the system who have never done this before. That happened 4 years ago with everything that happened in 2017. Those are people who cared about this community, came into the process because, as Neil said, they want to make the community better. I think that sometimes when we disagree, we don't realize that we all want that fundamental thing to make this place better. And, this is a place I love, and it's why I'm doing this work. Mostly love.
Well said, sir.
Yeah.
That's a sizzle reel.
That is a sizzle reel. We got comments coming in. You want them?
Yes, sir.
So this is from multi-business owner Andre Xavier. CVille Hop-On Tours. Going to be Punch Brewery, your neighbor out in Gordonsville, well hung. And CVille Tours. So this is a longer comment. So I'll read it. It's for both you two. Not directly related to affordable housing.
There we go.
But I would love to hear Neil and Sean's perspective on the following. Virginia and the Charlottesville-Albemarle area appear to have hit the jackpot under the American Rescue Plan thanks to our wacky independent city structure. Under the provisions of the plan, independent cities and the counties where they reside will each get separate cash payments. 38 of the 41 independent cities in the country are in Virginia. In addition, because Virginia has seen a net increase in the unemployment rate of more than 2 percentage points since last February, the state will receive its money in a single payment rather than 2 payments a year apart. Altogether, Charlottesville and Albemarle County will be getting a little over $40 million. Ask Sean and Neil about this.
I think that's a great question, Andre. I would say that one of the things that I would strongly encourage local governments to examine are one-time expenditures. There is nothing worse than receiving funds that you might not have expected and setting up an expectation of annual funding. What type of one-time expenditures would fit? Well, we've done some posts about the lack of revenue in the tourism area. So I believe the Convention and Visitors Bureau this coming year, fiscal year, will be down 30% in terms of what their monies are. They generate their monies directly from not local taxes, but visitors' taxes. It would make sense to me, since these are COVID-related funds, that short gap should be filled, not beyond, but should be filled, rather than when everybody has pent-up demand for tourism. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but the cable programs that I watch, I see a lot of the folks in Virginia Beach registered a URL, vabeachesopen.com. And they are really hammering it home. And they were really hurt by the COVID, just as we were. If you go to freeenterpriseforum.org, you'll see the tourism dollars that we've been tracking. The other thing you can look at is one-time investment in broadband, not operating, but establishment. That's something that I think we could say COVID has exacerbated. Albemarle has been surprisingly behind in my world. They've done a very good job in the last 2 years with the Albemarle Broadband Authority, ABBA, which I always think of Dancing Queen when I use that acronym. But it is an area where you could use one-time monies to make a difference. Sean, what do you think?
Well, no, I was actually going to say that about that. I think that tracking how or localities use that money. Now, before I'm not going to answer the specifics. I still need to look in. I think there's still been some delays, and I just haven't caught up with the. I think the city was still not quite sure as of a week ago how that money was going to come in for them through the American Rescue Plan. But we can already go back and look at how the COVID money, the CARES Act, which was the first round, was spent. And there's reports, and I can get those later. But I think that, to Neil's point about, it does show how that money gets spent. From what I understand, the city of Charlottesville, and I could be wrong on this, I need to double check it, it's very dangerous to do this, but I think that they might be plugging up the budget shortfall from this current fiscal year with that. And I think that again, that sort of gives you the temperature of the health of the financial health of the city of Charlottesville. It's not good. Let's just say that. They've doubled their capital expenditures over the last the capital budget, not the expenditures yet. And, those shortfalls, they could keep coming. I think that, and there's lots of reasons for that we can get into, but I think it just speaks to the importance of tracking all of this.
You see more shortfalls on the horizon?
It depends. I mean, I think a lot of it is the property tax has not been increased in the city of Charlottesville for 15 years.
I'm sorry, the property tax rate.
Property tax rate, yeah, I'm sorry. The taxes have gone up, which I can attest to from my assessment going up, which is also related to the comprehensive plan, but we won't go there just yet. But I think that potentially, because I think there's so much spending, and I don't have everything that I can say documented just yet, but there's projects that are very expensive that were supposed to be under construction by now, and they're not. There's a lot of sense in Charlottesville. There hasn't been a lot of fiscal scrutiny, let's just say, of the capital improvement program. And so that's a place where I think you might see some of that stuff being plugged in. I believe that what Neil was speaking about earlier, the hiring of additional lawyers for eviction prevention, I believe that some of the American Rescue Plan is committed to that funding. Some of that funding is committed to that purpose. And that is a one-time purpose, but is it? And I think it's one of these questions where, that's why it's important to pay attention to this, because, again, I'm not in the position to tell you what to think at all. I'm just here to say these are the things that are happening, and those budgets are really crucial to watch. Another thing I will say this is that the reason we still have buses going up and down our roads is entirely because of COVID relief funding from the federal government. They wouldn't be operating now. They would be probably done.
And they're going to operate fare-free for another at least year.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And which is great for some things, but I'll just say this then. It's important. I mean, and I am going to introduce something personal. I'm about to lose my bus line. My bus line's about to go away. So
why is that?
Because they're changing the routes, and they haven't.
To save money?
To make it more efficient, but they're getting rid of a route. The nearest bus stop that went to me. I bought my house because it was on a bus line, and that bus line went away 4 years later. And it's another one of those things where council hasn't even been told about it. There hasn't been a single briefing. I almost cursed just then.
You can curse.
Nah, I'm not going to do that.
No
Council hasn't even been given a single briefing on that. And I think that's what happens in a community like this when people aren't paying attention. And I can go off on that, but for a while.
You bought your house because of the bus line, and it went away 4 years after you bought it?
It was 5 doors down from my house, and it was really convenient. It was the Route 4.
Yeah.
And it served Forest Hills. I've said where I live. That's all right.
But everything changes.
And everything always can.
changes, and It changes because of the city decisions by CAT. It can also change, people buy their houses based upon school districts, and there's redistricting. Things change. One needs to be aware of that when making such purchases. And, you know, it's the it's ironic song. It's the bug in your Chardonnay. It's not ironic. It just sucks.
Oh, can you sing it, please, Neil?
Whoa. Time out, everybody. Time out. I'm going to take some executive producer role here. You know, I've been trying to struggle to get past Sean singing and Neil dancing.
I like Neil's pop culture references.
I'm trying
I like
to come
them.
up with questions.
They're a little dated, but
And all I've
I'll
got
take
in
it.
my head
He's
is
Sammy
Neil.
Hagar. That's why they're dated.
Well, he went from Sammy Hagar to ABBA. I mean,
and then
good.
If I don't date myself, no one else will.
yeah, well.
Vicky from Latois is watching. Meg Welch from Three Notches on the Feet. Liza Borges, hello. Bill McKenzie says, my assessment went up exponentially last year and I fought to get it down $20K. One of my neighbor's assessments increased 39%.
So let's talk about that, because that was one of the notes I was able to get down before my whole ABBA and singing thing went through my head here. So let's talk about that rate and assessment and how that actually works, right? Because there's that and then there's actual cash.
Right, but before we go too far down that road, the reality before pillaring the assessor, state code dictates
there you go.
that property must be assessed at 100% of value. That's important. As Keith will tell you, many moons ago in a county not so far away, they only did their reassessments every 6 years. Well,
Just like a Star Wars thing?
Yeah. Now who's dating themselves? The 6 years,
Really?
6 years is a long time
I
to
stood in
catch
line
up.
for the original movie. I'm just telling you.
I believe it. The 6 years is a long time to catch up property assessments.
Yeah.
And it makes for a huge jump. And what was happening was this locality was under billing the assessment
course.
and continually increasing the tax rate in order to generate the revenue.
That's exactly right.
Flip it over. If you're redoing the assessments every year or every 2 years, you have less need to increase the rate because you're increasing what you're multiplying by and you're increasing the revenue. There is a portion of the advertisement for every tax increase, every tax rate that talks about the equalization rate. What would the rate need to be to generate the exact same amount of revenue as you had last year?
Let's finish that conversation a little bit, because we're going to pivot a little bit to what this show is about, is real estate, right? And there's some real estate agents that are watching here. I will tell you, in this county we shall not name, every time that the assessment and tax bill goes out, I get a phone call. And what'll happen, it'll be 9 times out of 10, we will do our job, come up with what we feel is the market rate for the house, and then they go contest it. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, they win. So if you get one of these tickets and you know a real estate agent, give us a call or give a realtor a call and let them go ahead and do it, because if they'll reverse it. I mean, they'll adjust it.
They'll adjust it, and it can be adjusted upward.
It can be. Well, what'll happen is when you do the assessment and it's higher than the tax rate, we go, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's okay. Don't worry
We
about
never reached out to you.
it. I don't think I've ever had anybody go, well, let's go raise our taxes. They'll go, hey, I'm cool, thanks, and
Yeah.
we move on. But if my number is higher, right, or lower, actually, if it's lower than what they're saying, then we'll go up and knock on the door. Usually the phone call is hey, I'm ready to sell my house for this amount. When will I get a contract?
Right, and to be clear, there is a board of equalization that is an appointed board that does that. It's not you convincing someone that's your
exactly
bud. There's a board that does this. And in all the localities, they take it pretty seriously.
Very much so. No, it's a real thing. You know, you have a deadline, you have to submit it, you go in front of it just like a hearing, you present your case, and if your case is reasonable, typically you'll win.
Well, I mean, but I think, but also it's important to, to Bill's point, I would say that it's really interesting to look at the property comparables and the comparative transactions that have comps, I believe you call them. Comps, yeah. So for instance, and then figure out, and that's why I look at the property markets as often, I look at the records in the city as much as I can because I want to know what's selling. because that's going to dictate what the next assessments are going to be, and it's going to give you a sense. So, if you go back, again, I am going to knock on the city for a second here, because they have an effect too. From where we're sitting, and I mentioned this last time, they purchased the Lucky 7 and the Guadalajara for twice what it was worth. That had an effect on assessments, a ripple effect. It impacted the market for a project that may or may not actually ever happen. I don't know where it is.
Probably won't, right?
I don't know where it is. I think it's likely it will be a modified project, but of course, again, that's going to be up to a city council to take the final to do the final thing.
It doesn't matter. The damage is already done.
The damage is done, and if you look at then the next year when the Main Street Arena sold, it sold for twice of what it was worth, and then if you look at other property transactions, so in my neighborhood, just looking at the property here, so my land was assessed 2 years ago at $72,200. It's now assessed at $92,000. It's likely that if suddenly, though, and this is a neutral statement I'm saying here, but if suddenly I have the ability to build 3 units on my lot, that number is going to shoot up, especially in this market right now with supply is so constrained. Now, in 10 years from now, that might change, because, I do remember when I bought my house in 2008.
That's a good point.
It was the top of the market, and it plunged. That was a different market, and we're not in that market now, but we could be again. And I think it's unlikely at this point.
Yeah.
But I did phone up the assessor, and I got the assessment the next year. And actually that didn't need to go to the Board of Equalization, Neil, because it was pretty obvious that I'd paid a lower price than the assessment. So that was a different case. I think it was pretty cut and dry. But now there's no way I could challenge that, and there's no way I should, because I could sell that house right now. I'm not going to, but because I want to live here.
I know a guy.
Oh, I get that all the time, because I get those things. And I think that this is where a lot of people in the city are kind of concerned about displacement. For people like myself who are, I don't even know where I rank anymore, but I would say that, I'm selling my house would be very valuable, but where would I go?
Right.
And it's that displacement. And, but I would be out, but I don't want to live anywhere else. Well, that's not true. England. If anybody in England is watching and can hire me,
You'll move.
I'll go. I'm gone.
Yeah. Mustache Dan Pettit says,
hello, everybody.
Neil Williamson.
I'm English.
Warm beer, really?
That's not even.
That's not a thing.
Stereotype.
Yeah. He says,
I've been there.
We're going to England tomorrow.
Okay, we'll go to England. I'm telling you, I've been there many times. Warm beer. But if you were to strip I happen to know where you live, and I will not disclose it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to strip your house off of your lot and ask me to sell it, it'd be way more than $90,000.
Oh.
like 150.
Well, but
Yeah.
doesn't that speak to being property rich and not really being able to do anything because you can't go anywhere and move to something else?
Without a doubt, and this is why you and I think we are passionate about this missing middle and passionate about bringing this missing middle in, because if Sean could add an ADU to the back of his property, which you can do. There's an ordinance that provides it, but is really wonky. Or you could turn your property into 2 units or 3 units. Then you receive money from a rental perspective.
but isn't his overhead going to go up? Like he said, isn't he going to get taxed more? Isn't it going to be the assessed value of that land is going to go up, like he said?
But if it's paying, but then again, to wrap it back though, if it's paying for the services that mitigate that infrastructure, and that's where it gets back to how well is the city managed, and is it possible? Can the city actually accomplish things? I think they can, and they will, and I think hopefully under this city manager, that can begin to happen. I'm not concerned about my tax. I'll pay whatever taxes I'm doing if I feel confident that money's being spent well, and I think most people are there. But I think I had a point that I lost. I'll shut up.
So to go back to that comment, is you got to do your ROI, return on investment. This is a business transaction, and that's part of the problem or the struggle that they faced out in Portland and Seattle with doing this, is because they removed their owner occupancy requirement because they were finding that if you were not in this space or completely understood how this works, folks were getting themselves into financial trouble.
Of course. That's what I'm saying.
Just like you said.
Yeah.
So they removed that, so where somebody like the land trust could come in and say, okay, Sean, we're going to do a 99-year lease on this 100 by 100 or whatever it is on your backyard and build an ADU for affordable housing. And oh, by the way, I'm going to kick in X amount of the rent to you, so it makes work for you. You get
See, that's how it has to work. Because if you give these guys, and I'm going to get out of the way, I'm learning from you guys. That's why I'm trying not to talk nearly as much today. If you give the land a lot more versatility and you give it an opportunity to have 4 units, like his example, the land has more value.
Correct.
And this is just a layman's comment here. If the land has more value, then it's gonna be worth more to a city from a tax standpoint.
Well, it's
if the person who owns the land can't monetize the land by adding other units, they're just gonna get more overhead, are they not?
Neil, what's Developer 101? Starts with a D.
Predictability and density.
Density.
Yeah?
Right.
But look at what's happening right now with the Crozet plan. I stated on Tuesday night, is Crozet's missing middle starting to become missing? Staff had put forth a strong proposal for a missing middle. The Crozet Advisory Committee.
What was that first word you said?
Crozet Advisory.
What was
Committee.
that?
Advisory.
There you go.
They had a vote.
They had a vote.
Yeah.
And they said they didn't want the missing middle.
The advisory committee.
The advisory committee.
The Board of Supervisors had to chastise them a little bit.
A little bit, yes. And I have been opposed to those committees. How long, Sean?
Since the beginning.
Yeah, since the beginning.
Since the beginning of time.
Well, they serve, Neil, they serve a purpose.
But they no longer serve a purpose.
But
They are
when-
beyond what they should be doing.
But when they're led to believe they have authority, that's when you have a problem.
Well, if you give them money to spend, which Albemarle did, it's a problem.
Yeah, you
Well,
get-
but they do have a certain moral authority to a certain extent. I mean, if you have a population, look at Breezy Hill, for instance. This was a Southern Development project that went before the village of Rivanna for 190 units originally. It's down to 79. And even now, I did
Well, I
not.
thought it was 60.
I think
it
it's
is
like 79 was,
Okay.
was on the plan. But now, but at the committee meeting the other day, it's like there's still, the neighborhood is still quibbling to get that number. Well, some members of that community still want that number to go down.
How
even
big is
more.
that parcel?
80 acres, 79 acres.
I'll figure
I
that
think.
out. I got it.
79
Yeah.
acres and 79 units. That's a unit an acre gross density in the development area.
Yeah.
which is supposed to be
Be
for the-
where development is focused.
So let's talk about this.
Well, hold on before though, but let's go ahead and say this though. It gets to tie us back to the zoning. The zoning says rural area, and that's where this is all at. The mismatch is that that's still rural, so it still needs that rezoning, and so it gives the
But
public.
what does the comp plan
Right,
say?
right. There,
comp plan
this is
says-
the conflict.
I wanna
This
what
is-
does it
bring
say
this-
exactly? It says
the comp
R4
plan,
there.
The comp plan suggests, originally, when in the latest revision, had a hard edge on the rural area. Now, when you talk about what is a hard edge on the rural area, imagine driving on Rio Road where you see development on the left side as you're headed out, and you'll see a farm on the right. That's a hard edge. The other version is a transitional edge. And what has been suggested is we need a transitional edge now. And in this case, the master plan suggests this should be the lowest density in the development area where Breezy Hill is. And I want to be clear, the Free Enterprise Forum does not take a position on projects. This is a policy discussion. What is the appropriate density? The developer in this case said, I feel as though land in the development area should be greater net density than 1.25 units an acre.
It was Charlie Armstrong.
It was Charlie Armstrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's a question. If you have a limited
But they're not
development
even
area.
there, though.
What's that?
They're a quarter of a unit off, based on the math we're talking about.
Well, again.
Well, the neighborhood. I think there are many members of that committee though who have been involved with this since the beginning, and even with the creation of that master plan, who have said from the beginning it never should have had that. So they have. So again, these are conversations. But let's bring it back to the city for a second and the cost of lots. I just wanted to make sure I got this out there before I forgot. I've been, as I said, I've been looking at the markets. If you look at a lot of the developed lots or the lots that have been made ready for development. Some of them in Laughlin Hill, last year they were 55,000. They're now selling to builders for 110. Even this year.
Just the dirt.
Just the dirt. Well, the dirt and the connections into all the various things.
You're a little low.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's like they've actually increased. So over the course of this spring, as we've had the squeezing of the market, there was one I saw in late March. I'm only up to March, although there was a major commercial one I want to talk about in a second, if I could. I think it was 135, 140. That number's only going to go up. And, so I think that's just a thing to factor in as we think about this. And I think more people talking about this, for me, I'm interested in people like myself being able to figure out how can the little person like myself benefit from this at some point in our lifetimes and keep that wealth or whatever.
So, Sean, take your journalist hat off for a moment, right? you are now allowed to do up to 4 units, whatever the process is. Is that something you would consider?
I would like to have conversations with my neighbors. I'm in a very specific place about what's our collective future. In other words, what's going to happen 30, 40 years from now? Or maybe even not then. I abut on a major public infrastructure project to be. And I think that conversation should take us into effect because my house was built in 1954. I personally feel no need to preserve it. And I'm coming to those issues where in 10, 15 years, I'm going to have to replace a roof.
So you're basically saying you would tear down the house?
Modify it in some way. But that's when it gets into setbacks. I mean, that's where the zoning, again, what predictability you said earlier. If I know what I can build in 10, 15 years, but it's important to not tick off my neighbors and to make sure, because I want to continue to live in harmony with them. There are some on my street who are really ticked off and they don't understand the appraisal process. So they say, oh, the city's trying to get rid of me. And it's like, no, it's not an invisible hand because we can clearly see that, but it's something bigger than one person or anything. This is an attractive market. People want to move here. They want to live someplace in Breezy Hill, Crozet, even up in Greene County where you're seeing a lot more homes come on the market. Lovingston, your boy Jesse Rutherford, for instance, he wants to get in on this for Lovingston and for Nelson County. And how does that all work? Well, that's the story we're all going to tell over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Well,
what private citizen would be able to do 4 units out of their own pocket on their land?
Oh, I'd need a developing partner. And
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to get to at this point of it. That's why even just a simple thing like removing the ADU, auxiliary dwelling units requirement of owner occupied, and you can put a bow around it, say it must be an affordable housing nonprofit, right? You have to partner with somebody to go ahead and do this. But I was just thinking as you guys were chatting, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm having a lot of fun. This is the stuff that just excites me to have a conversation. What do we got on the feed?
We have
sir?
Sarah Hill Buchensky, Realtor, Howard Hanna. This is a question for Neil and Sean. She says, I think the CCAC was worried about infrastructure not being able to handle more density.
I think that is a question that has been asked. I can think back to 2002, where DISC 2, which was the second Development Initiative Steering Committee, which came after DISC 1 and son of DISC, and after the Land Use LERC Committee, it said concurrency of infrastructure. What that meant is, as people moved in, you ramped up your infrastructure. That has not happened.
Yeah.
No locality is doing it. And quite honestly, I don't believe by state code for the education you can do it. You almost literally have to have 6 trailers on the property before you expand the property for the students. You have to have the students there before you get there.
And sometimes it takes a while. So in Crozet, though, I mean, so this is sort of a meta argument for this, is that there has been a lot of money spent in Crozet. There was the Jarman's Gap Road improvements, which sort of set up a lot of the ability for a lot of those properties west of downtown to at least have, be able to walk and bike to downtown. So there has been some, but in the downtown core itself. But, I think what Neil is kind of maybe saying, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, is that sometimes that argument is used as a way to stop something you don't want. And I think that's what the Village of Rivanna has been saying for years. They've been saying that no more development until you widen 250.
Right, and
that's not legal. You
that
can't
was illegal
actually
and it's
do
in
that.
the comprehensive plan.
Yeah. And so that's something where, again, it's like, and the board knows that. The Board of Supervisors knows that, but they can also vote however they want, and as long as they don't say that explicitly when they take the vote.
So I'm going to make a little bit of a plug because I've got a transportation roundtable that's going to happen on the 20th with the Regional Housing Partnership that yours truly is chairing. And I had a pre-interview interview with a gentleman by the name of Todd Lippman, who's from the Victoria Transit Policy, way out in Vancouver and Seattle area. But he's going to come in and talk about selling smart growth, literally exactly what you were talking about, Neil, on this chicken and egg thing, right? And he specializes in transportation in the rural growth areas. So hopefully this will be a good conversation. I'm making a bit of a plug. chime in. Maybe.
And I will be recording it and reporting from it because actually it's the third, I think, of the Regional Housing Partnership Speaker Series.
It is the third.
And the last two were highly worth watching. The last
Yes.
one was William Park of Pinnacle Development, and I did not hear it, but again, this is all regional. He presented to the Fluvanna County Board of Supervisors for another of these projects, and I don't know where that, Keith, you would know more about what happened with that.
Yes, I know a little bit about that because I'm involved in it. What they're doing, go figure.
That's a tax investment
Go
project,
figure.
right?
Smith
Right.
is trying to figure out how he can navigate this without going to some
Oh, no,
sort of...
well, I didn't mean to say that.
Some
What I'm
sort of
trying to say
jail
is
here.
that Regional Housing Partnership
one?
Series...
I don't know, but I've got a
One of
couple.
them.
I got a couple of jail possibilities here.
You'll be
But-
fine.
But the public portion of that is what they're working on is, for lack of a better term, I use a tax abatement, but a tax incentive for a real estate property tax incentive, so they can put in this apartment complex that they're building. I believe, and Neil will correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's either 60% AMI or 70% AMI.
Right.
I can't.
And the reason those work, and it's being done in Albemarle, what's being done is
That's being done over at Brookhill.
that company is paying full boat on the assessment, and then when they produce the documents that prove that they're delivering affordable units at the level they said they would, they're actually refunded a portion of the property tax, but the county always gets the property tax amount that
First.
would have been there
Sure.
if the building didn't come into play. So there, it's a synthetic deal, but it is critically important to know that that doesn't work just with that.
I can
you
tell
need
you
to
this
have
much.
you need to have federal stuff going on there
That's exactly
too,
right.
the LIHTC funds.
That's exactly right.
And you have to leverage 6 or 7 things. It is so hard to build anything affordably right now, and you leverage everything. Maybe you get the land trust involved. I mean, I think Keith's on 65 committees, and one of them I'm sure can help you.
Ray Cadell just
Is
shared
Mrs.
the
Smith
show.
watching? 'Cause I've told her only on 60. So
Mustache Dan Pettit says, depending on who you are, who do you consider to be the missing middle?
So there's two parts to that. That's a great question, Dan Mustache.
Mustache Dan Pettit.
Mustache Dan Pettit.
Yeah.
So I've always talked about missing middle as two portions of it. There's the physical part of it, right? We've got high rises, we've got single family detached, and the physical component of that, these what they call mid rises or duplexes or townhomes. And then the second half of that is the buyer, right? The buyer profile, the missing middle on that. There's the person who's can afford a home here, and then there's a person here, and what's in the middle. Sometimes they correlate, and sometimes they do not correlate. You want to tackle the rest of that?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the missing middle is often, I would almost say regularly, the people we want to have in our community.
That's exactly
They're the
right.
people that serve the community. They're the journalists. They're the firefighters. They're the police folks you want in the community. They're the teachers. This is the missing middle. They're our neighbors. They're the people we want to be our neighbors.
I'll give you a prime example. My daughter is a teacher out in Seattle. My son-in-law is in his residency, so he's a doc. They nationwide, they get like $50,000 a year. So, and they are living in an exact situation that Sean is going to do, which is they took their single-family detached home and turned it into 3 units because you could do that in Seattle. The owner lives on the upper level, and the bottom level they turned it into apartments. Otherwise, they would be traveling about 45 hours from Idaho somewhere to get into downtown Seattle because they couldn't afford it. So what they did is they increased the density of the units, I'm calling that a missing middle, and they can now walk to school or take a bike to school or whatever.
But I think it's important to recognize that some of the discussion about the missing middle, one of the questions that came from the feed was suggesting, which I think I've seen on some of the flyers that have been out and about, that Charlottesville is going to outlaw single-family homes.
Well, we started that, I believe.
That's actually being posted in the feed. So that's a misconception that hopefully we've debunked with this show.
So let's be clear. It will.
That's literally being posted on the feed.
So you want to clarify that?
My opinion is that this is a permissive ordinance concept, and nothing happens without a willing property owner. That being said, neighborhoods will change. Bus routes will change. This is part of being in a living organism. And I often use the example, I'm not sure why, of Carsbrook. What would Carsbrook look like if it was duplexes and triplexes instead of single family? Well, quite honestly, there's going to be an infrastructure challenge there. That's a small, tight little community, nice houses, but is that what the community wants to do? That's the conversation. That's the conversation to have is, who do you want to be when you grow up?
So to bring Sean back into the conversation,
There's comments for Sean. Here.
Why don't you do that then?
Okay, so this is from Kelsey Canfield. She says, I live in Rivanna Village. Sean, what you're missing is the road cannot support the traffic if we add more density on that side of Albemarle. Have you ever tried to leave Rivanna Village in the morning when I'm taking kids to school or when people are coming back to work? Now imagine if a fire truck, police car, or ambulance had to get by.
That's a comment, and it's certainly one that is valid, and from that person's experience, I would say from that, you'd have to look at what's known as a level of service, which I have not looked at for a while. I believe it's probably a C or a D, which is well within the confines of what would be considered safe.
What's that mean?
Basically, congestion, this is something that came up a long time ago when we were talking about the Western Bypass, about, well, is it the right level of service? We haven't had that conversation at this level. But the realistic thing about that is that, again, it goes back to the point. Was that the right place for the development? Again, the perspective from many in that community is that was not the right place for more development, but people still live there, and I think that's it. And if you look at other roads, I think that 250 isn't necessarily going to happen overnight, but there are other projects happening in that area, such as that people might not like. No, I'm very well aware of that argument. That's the argument that Linda White and others have been making for a long time, and it's one I've certainly put in my stories. The question is that that's an argument. I don't have anything to argue against that or not. It's just a perspective.
So I'm going to try to explain it in my vernacular, and this is not support of a project or denial of a project, but what level of service means. At some point in time, a road was built, and VDOT made a determination X number of vehicles can travel safely up and down this pipeline.
That's what he's saying.
That's exactly right. I'm just going to try to explain it a little bit differently. So just imagine this as a pipe, right? And they've designed this pipe to run 100,000 gallons of water a day through it. But for 20 years, there's only been 50,000 gallons of water run through that. And then if you run another 20 or 10,000, it just fills that pipe up. But the road itself, and I'm not saying we have no idea what the level of service of that, but just trying to explain that in the vernacular. Am I doing a decent job of that?
You are, but it also should be noted that level of service, as the comment clearly states, is not a blanket, this road is a level of service.
Got it.
At morning rush,
At
the
peak
level of
hours.
service by peak hours is always lower than the level of service outside of those hours.
And you can engineer your way around level of service to reduce the level of service.
And you will see that with COVID and work from home and flex time, you're seeing level of service change because people are coming into the office later, not coming into the office at all. I saw this when the federal government
Shut down.
100 years ago, the federal government actually changed their policy when Metro opened. They no longer paid for parking, but they paid for Metro passes. That changed the traffic in Washington, D.C. dramatically. And they instituted flex time. So you saw engineers getting on the Beltway, doing 70 miles an hour on the Beltway because they could at 5 or 6 in the morning and leaving work at 2 and getting paid their full wage. These things are happening. Schools is a good point. And taking the kids to school, there always will be crunch times. The question is, how do we fix it? Is it all physical, or are there externalities that we could change that would make it different?
And just to get to the school point, I mean, what you see, I mean, that's everywhere. So a lot of the conversation in Crozet and a lot of the concerns about people in Crozet is about that peak time, is about the fact that when, that people might have to wait 2 or 3 lights to get through. So then this happens in many communities where there's a school. Sheriff's departments get involved, and they're hired to come in and navigate traffic. At Peabody School a few years ago, there was an 8th grader who came up with an innovative plan to do something. There's light fixes. I mean, these are things that, again, it's like when there's a problem, it's like, do you know those little traps things that you put your fingers in. It's like, and that if you keep pulling, it gets worse. Well,
Yeah.
sometimes if you can maybe take a step back and look at other solutions, there are other solutions. Go back to the comprehensive plan for a second. Something that when I was an advocate briefly, I did push for, and I'm still interested in covering this, is something called a Transportation Demand Management Program, a regional one. The draft plan calls for that regional Transportation Demand Management Plan, and I could bore you for years about that.
He can.
I can, and I will,
And he
but
does.
not now. But those individual human transactions that we
We've
all
got
have.
sponsors we got to take care of. I'm just saying.
Well, such as does Bob Pinio design?
Oh, he's come on the show?
Yeah, Bob.
He's
a
on the
great
show.
dude.
I was going to plug him earlier when we were talking about the ADUs,
Yeah.
but I was going to say it's like each of us is an individual who is in a system, and when we all use the system at the same time, perfect illustration this week with the gas lines. The problem was made, there was a big external problem, but the problem was made worse in localities because all across the East Coast because of those individual decisions that I need to go get gas right now. I'm not faulting anybody who did that, by the way.
No, not only do I need to get gas right now, I need to get
To
gas
fill out 10 containers
for
for
the next 100
backups.
years.
Yeah.
And I'll just say it, screw the other guy. Right?
And that's one of those things
It's the
where,
toilet
again,
paper
it's
all over again.
There you go.
Yeah.
it's that trap, it's that finger trap again. And that was a situation where the issue was compounded by those individual behaviors magnified by
pumping.
10,000.
What you got on the feed, sir?
This is from Daniel Linsky. And speaking of gas, he says, I'm sitting in the Costco gas line. It's moving much faster right now.
And listening to us.
I've listened to the entire show through Spotify, and I have a question for Sean. You mentioned earlier today that the Tiger Fuel may be coming back to Black Cat Road. Is this true?
Don't know about that. I was only speaking to the lawsuit. Now, where that got left, though, I can say this. The supervisors, as I said, they deadlocked on a vote, which meant that the request for the special use permit went away. But, of course, the underlying legal claim in that case was that the special use permit was never needed. At that time, Tiger Fuel said that we would build something different. That hasn't happened. My sense is they really would like to put something there if they can, but that's a conversation for another day. Let's see how this lawsuit gets resolved.
There's a lot of road that needs to be plowed through before we get to that process.
Ray Cadell says, hey, Neil, I live in Carsbrook.
I know.
Okay, Ray Cadell's watching. He says that. This comment's come in and said, what other shortfalls can Charlottesville expect? This came up earlier in the show. I believe you brought that up.
Shortfalls. Well, I think it's something to watch, and I think that there's always something too. Is that let's talk about revenue sharing, for instance. This is a long-term conversation. I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon. But keep in mind that many people might not know that the revenue sharing agreement where the county currently pays the city, that could go the other way potentially. Let's say that the city was to upzone, and this is theoretical, all of our land prices doubled. That would change the formula. And I don't know what rate it is. I haven't looked at it that much. But at some point, it's
a substantial
conceivable.
amount of money.
$19 million the last check.
It was 16 this year, wasn't it?
Well, it's 16 this year. The last check was issued was 19.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just talk about that.
But I was going to say,
$19 million check written from Albemarle County to Charlottesville.
Right.
so at some point, the long-term, I would say that long-term going forward, that's now a third, that agreement doesn't pay as high as car insurance as it used to because it's 40 years old now, I think.
It is, but we've done a study on this, and if you go to freeenterpriseforum.org, you can see our hindsight report, and it shows what
Good
land
job
was.
on plugging, man.
I'm not
Content
done
slinger.
yet.
Content slinger.
I'm not done
Good
yet.
job.
We have a question for you here, Neil.
Well, let me just say that in the life of the revenue sharing agreement, which is forever, but so was annexation. So it's important to remember that Charlottesville has never stroked a check to Albemarle County.
Not yet, but I'm just saying that the
Did
way
you
that
say since annexation?
that
No,
the
I
way
said
the
since
formula is
inception.
written,
Got
but the way the formula is written, I'm just saying that, or the number could go down, which it's not an insubstantial amount of money that the city gets from the county every year. And the idea, well, actually, we won't go there, but other shortfalls could involve, at some point, the other thing to look at, and so far they've done a pretty good job of keeping their AAA bond rating. That ever gets lower, suddenly we're going to be paying a lot more in debt service. And that is something to watch, and it's something that the next counselors are going to have to watch carefully, because this council the current council has deferred a lot of the long-term decisions to raise taxes, which the current capital improvement program is based on. It's based on the assumptions that we're going to raise our tax rate 10 cents over the next 5 years. And that's not well understood. And usually when you're up that point, it's difficult to defer those decisions. That could end up being tricky.
New studio improvements. We got to get seatbelts on these things for conversations
Wow.
like that.
Did you almost fall out of the chair?
No. This is just
All
going,
over the place.
It's great.
It's going great.
Soon we're going to have the boardroom table.
There you go.
That's going to be great.
I'm super excited.
We're going to have a
about
really
that.
long
But-
table here,
but-
so we don't have to look through these cameras. And I apologize for that, guys.
It's all good.
Yeah, we'll be next to each other like on a table.
I'm
It's,
just-
it's been ordered, Sean. It's
I'm just
coming.
pretending I'm on a Zoom call.
You're actually doing a really good job looking in the camera here. I'm
Looking
really
right
impressed
there.
with your execution.
He's 10 times better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing it. Both of them are doing a good job. This is a question for Neil. Can we ask the question too?
Yeah, sure.
So this is from Blake about Greene County. He said, Mr. Williamson, called you Mr. Williamson. Mr. Williamson, it would seem to me the tourist occupancy tax, he called it tourist instead of transit occupancy tax. He said the tourist occupancy tax should not go to SL Williamson for paving a parking lot. It should go to advertising Greene County so more folks from outside the area come to Greene and spend the money in the county. Why are we paving a parking lot?
Great question.
Mr. Williamson.
To Mr. Williamson, who is no relation to SL Williamson, although I know the folks there and they're great. I will say that the funds for TOT in Greene County, similar to most localities, are approved by the tourism board, the expenditures, and in this case, it was an unanticipated cost, and it had to go to the board of supervisors for approval, and it won approval 4-1. Marie Durer voted against it for the very reasons that were stated, that those funds should be for
Attracting people.
attracting people. The flip side of it is, if you look at the Charlottesville Convention and Visitors Bureau, the majority of that board either works for or is elected officials. I think that is a huge problem.
Me
I
too.
did not know that. I
Yeah.
learned something
There's
today.
a city council and board of supervisors all over that board, and it's not people that are like
In the
legit
business.
stakeholders in the business.
Yeah, in the
It makes no sense
I
on
did
paper.
not know that.
Yeah.
And I was involved in that group long ago, before they really had money to spend, and it
And they're
was
spending a lot of money.
They are, and they're doing well. There's just this incredible. We've written extensively about this. This
Content
incredible
slinger.
conflict
Yeah.
between the city and the county. And if you're promoting, I mean, when you go places, where do you say you're from, Keith? When you go out west, where are you from?
From Charlottesville.
Actually, I say Fulvana County, but that's okay.
Adam Healy brought this point, the interim executive
say
director,
Charlottesville,
and I'll
I say
get out of your
Fulvana.
way. They were doing it to put the conflict into perspective. They were trying to come up with a T-shirt for the area, and the Albemarle portion of the CACVB was adamant that Albemarle County in some capacity be on the T-shirt. And to Adam's point, he's like, when you travel and you live in Albemarle, you don't say you're from Albemarle County. You say you're from Charlottesville. So there's an identity issue.
I
when I-
agree with you. Most people do. I just always say Fulvana.
When I look at the walls, I see I Love CVille.
Right.
Yeah,
And we talk about Central Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's to your point.
I'm
But-
still
but-
from Lynchburg. It's
You
just-
say you're from Charlottesville.
No, I'm from Lynchburg. I mean, I'm from this region. I think that's these issues, exactly as all of it. We are part of a bigger state and a bigger infrastructure, and I think that the last Convention and Bureau Center thing, it's like the dynamic, Jerry, that you discussed. It came up. There was a presentation from someone at the Ix Park about a project that they want to do to promote Charlottesville, and because they're located downtown, and they wanted to get arts and a member from the Board of Supervisors said, why isn't anything from Albemarle County on this? And keep in mind, this wasn't even a seat. There was no local money involved with this project.
Was
It
that Supervisor Malik?
I don't want to say who it was,
Okay.
but
So
you
it's
can go
interest-
back. But you are welcome to read community engagement and go back and listen to the record. See, that's my
Content
content
slinger.
slinging.
Content slinger.
You know, I'm learning from the best here.
Or is it Mudslinger? I don't know.
It's
No mud for
content
me.
slinger.
Oh, got it. I was
But-
confused.
Played it well.
But I was going to say this entire region, and for me, that does include all the way to Christiansburg and Blacksburg. And the fact that let's talk about another thing that is a big mover in this area, and it is the fact that our rail situation is going to change drastically. And
yeah.
it means that it opens up all kinds of tourism along this entire
Talk
corridor.
about that for a second, because that's a big some big news.
There's a run coming from here.
Well, there already. I mean, so this is
The
something
DC,
again.
right?
There already is the DC route. I'm still trying to confirm the details, but the second train that
Right.
we've been promised for 6 or 7 years now is expected to come next year. I still don't know how they're going to work that out with the long. Well, I'm not going. Again, I could bore you with transportation all day, but. Governor Northam, when he was here last week to promote the Green Business Alliance, and he did not get on a train to go down to Christiansburg, but then he went down to Christiansburg. I've got to disclose, I went to Virginia Tech, and I'm a proud. I'm trying to figure that out. But it's exciting to me to think that UVA and Virginia Tech will be connected by train, and then further up to the center in Northern Virginia, where they're both located. I mean, if you think about that in terms of the
awesome.
future,
Yep.
and look in terms of, for me, that means that, I mean, this is just, I don't have any, if the fact that now that the state of Virginia will own a lot of that right-of-way, it changes a lot of potentials, even for local, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but local rail and local service, which might end up meaning that there could be new communities built on the way. I mean, at least that's how I think of it, is that,
Well, so
I think that's how I look at it too.
So development along rail is definitively going to happen. Development along bus routes, because they change, is always questionable, right? But
Well, what are you saying to the man over there? He
Well,
just told
well,
you he
unless
bought
it-
his house on a bus route.
don't worry.
But
Well, it was a cost. I knew it
the
was gonna
reality
happen.
is
Pointed out a
the
fact.
reality is fixed route transit
There you go.
is a problem if you fix it in the wrong place.
Fixed route transit is a problem if you fix it in the wrong place.
Or if
so
a
what does that
pen-
mean? The neighborhood moves?
No, what I mean is that you could have it grow to that spot, transit-oriented development. You can see that with the metro system extensions going on right now up in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
But the idea of bus routes, bus rapid transit, regular bus routes, all of those being able to change to serve the need.
so
rather
that's the
than
opposite
that.
of what I just said. So it is more flexible, is what you're saying.
I'm saying it's more flexible, and you can you can put Sean off the bus by changing the route. You can't do that with light rail.
Yeah.
And I'll make a plug again for because that's literally the conversation
you.
we're going to have on the 20th with it. And it was interesting. I'm reprocessing where you're from question in my head, and I had to explain to this consultant, because this was our first meeting, how Charlottesville works, right? We've got a 10-mile thing. We got 50,000 people. The balance of the 250,000 are out in these outer rings. So
Well, it's important to recognize also that elections matter.
there you go.
And we are in the midst of a primary election right now. Early voting is going on now. It's important to be understanding of the candidates. To that end, Sean and I are getting together on May 27th.
I heard.
Plugger.
Yeah, this is great news.
We are going to be joined by all three candidates for the Democratic nomination on the 27th, and we'll be discussing many of the topics we discussed today. I will be promoting it via our Facebook page as well as Twitter. Sean will be mentioning it in the news group. We have worked up some pretty good questions. We learned a lot from your session with the candidates.
Will you have them in advance? Will the candidates have them
The
in advance?
candidates will have
We're still
the-
figuring out that. I think in some cases, I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Neil, but I think that in a lot of cases, I think we'll give the topics, but not necessarily the question.
That's
because,
great.
That's the right way to
Because
do
in a
it.
lot of cases, you want people to be able
To think about it.
I want to see how people think.
Yeah.
And-
Somebody
and-
who ran for office and sat on the other side of a table of this gentleman asking questions some 100 years ago.
He asked you questions?
Oh, yeah,
Was it the Fluvanna supervisors?
Oh, yeah, it was like
that
100
was that race. How did that turn out, Keith?
Oh, wonderful. I didn't get elected.
We don't bring that topic up.
No,
here.
no, no.
We
it
don't
was,
bring
it
that
was a
topic
godsend.
up.
I didn't
But
get elected. I
That's
love it.
awesome.
But to bring it back to,
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate that.
I was going to say this earlier when we were talking about elections. I mean, I'm
the guy
still,
asking the questions, totally.
I still am absolutely flummoxed that we have so few candidates running in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
I thought there would be more people who
But
would.
you understand why, though.
Oh yeah, it's completely it's crazy. But then again, at the same time, I'm even more concerned about Albemarle County.
Yes.
Because we are at a point where there are 3 uncontested
What do you got?
races for the Board of
Samuel Miller.
Supervisors. Yes, Jim Andrews,
Yeah.
he publicly announced yesterday, I'll have something in the newsletter about that later on today. But
Supervisor
so far,
McNeil.
yes, who will
Yeah.
be facing her third. She was opposed in her first term.
But not now.
And not her second, or this will be her third race.
Yeah.
And Ned Galloway has not, this will be a second consecutive race where he is not
terrifying.
faced.
Well, and contested races sharpen the saw.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders
Just
is
like
that,
business.
you know,
I
at
know,
the
I know.
local,
I've enjoyed it. I don't care.
And I'll say
the first
this.
guy- that's the first show in 162 I kind of pointed
I'm having
to.
so much fun with
I
these
am.
guys.
But I'll say this, though. Is that they're all Democrats, but I think that in Virginia, we don't elect our school board candidates as a partisan race. I would love it in some way if we could figure out a way to not do that at the local level, to basically just like not have it be party. I know that's not going to work.
I love that idea.
But
Man,
I-
I've been advocating.
That's a great idea,
Because
Sean.
if you look at, so there's one, okay, I don't know if Gary Grant's watching, but Gary Grant gets on the Board of Supervisors meetings every time.
Oh,
and
he
says,
watches this show regularly.
and he always says, and he'll probably take me to task on this. He's a reader, which thanks Gary. But he always says this Democrat board. But the thing is, there's so much diversity on that board from where they are. I mean, there are so many 3-3 votes, and there have been so many. It's not a unified board by any means.
So
to put it all into party, I think at the local level, and in some cases at the state level, it's maybe not the best way to make these policy discussions.
Amen, brother.
I've been preaching for 3
That's a
decades.
great freaking idea.
Local
It
politics.
should be independence.
devoid of.
And
of
it was in
Yeah.
Albemarle for so long.
That's part of the reason I lost, by the way, as
Yeah.
you well know.
You ran as an independent?
I ran as an independent.
Oh,
Well-
damn it.
Yeah, I ran as
But I think you could do that. When was that race?
Oh, I think 102 years.
The
ago.
times,
It was
the
07 or
times
so?
have changed, is
Well,
what
that's
you're
what I'm saying. Is that
Yeah.
so? Dennis Rooker, he served for 3 terms, independent the whole time. Diantha McKeel, in her first time, was an independent.
I didn't know that.
And then she took on the Democrat.
Why did she take it on?
I think it just becomes.
Safe?
Well,
Not-
it becomes
not safe, organizationally
helpful to have the party apparatus working with you.
How
Yeah.
so?
Because you have a
When you're in office and you're the incumbent, it helps to have it?
when you're in office, when you're the incumbent, it does help to get that groundswell together. It really does.
Even though she was running unopposed the
Even-
second and third terms?
It really doesn't matter. There's still work to be done, and each of these supervisors does this work, and then you have campaign work, which is different work to be done, and you can spread it out more easily to the team because there is a team in place through the Democrat or Republican Party that is an existing apparatus
Well,
for getting things
that's
done.
demoralizing and
Well, it's
frustrating.
also
So in my
fundraising
case-
too. I mean,
my
I think.
case- I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was going to say it's also fundraising. I mean, it's much easier to get money if you have like
Isn't
it's.
that demoralizing?
It certainly isn't encouraging, and I would just say that
She
because
basically went as
it's-
an independent and said, let me hook my saddle or my wagon to the Democratic Party because I have more systems in place for money and support and infrastructure.
But to
Or-
defend her for a second,
Yeah.
though, on this, she did run for 4 terms and won 4 terms as an independent on the school board.
Right.
It's very likely that first time was just inertia, and then it was just sort of like, oh, I can do this now. But, I've never had a conversation with Diantha about that, but I'm thinking that might be it. But
and the Democrats may have identified her positions as ones that they supported, and they said, we would like to help you, which is absolutely the way it works.
Well,
Yeah.
I work with Diantha regularly, and I'm a fan of Diantha. I think
And
does a
she
really good
is,
job.
I'm going to do it. She's also one of the guest speakers at the Regional Housing Partnership next Thursday, March 20th.
Sean Tubbs is getting
Hence-
good at
Content
hence
slinger.
You're doing a hell of a job, Sean Tubbs.
Hey, I know.
This is awesome.
This was
We're gonna
fun.
Repeat this. There was 2 huge topics that I wanted to get to that we didn't get to, which was one we just started.
Well,
which
this is
the-
when you recruit them to come back regularly.
That's what
here.
I'm going to do. That's what I'm doing right now. The second one is
We didn't even get to all the comments. We had questions for Neil we didn't even get to.
Well, I mean, I'm.
We're running out of time. We know. We got to go. We got to go here.
The director.
This guy's the guy. This is the guy we're screwing right here.
Yeah.
Not anybody else.
Because we keep
okay?
on doing this until okay, it's 12:30. Let's
Right.
keep on going.
This is the guy we're screwing. It's not fair to him.
But we do want to tackle this. I do anyway. Want to tackle this UVA in the affordable housing space. So that's where our next little conversation, because that's probably an hour in itself. But
People are asking broadband and green for Neil. People want to know more about the shortfalls in Charlottesville from Sean. People, they want to know more. Sarah Helpuchinski just said, great show. Thank you for sharing your time and knowledge. We're getting that from a number of people. How about, why don't we close on this? The where we can get the Democratic Forum, where we can watch, get the information, or learn, because we haven't identified that yet.
Neil, have we figured that out yet?
Have you figured that out?
I'm going to make a pitch.
Okay.
We're going to have a big table here. I love Charlottesville.
Well, no, I'm not trying to take their thunder. This is their show, their forum.
We'll be sending out the Zoom. It will be a virtual forum, and we will be putting that out in both of our feeds so that you should be subscribing to Sean's community engagement newsletter. You should subscribe to the Free Enterprise Forum blog, and both of those will be promoting it heavily. Again, it's May 27th, and we're going to be doing it live. Oh, it's right around the corner.
I got to do, just in the interest of making sure we have the totality, the Public Housing Association of Residents had a forum this last Wednesday, which I haven't even seen yet. I got to confess, I'm a week behind on everything. We need to just have another pandemic or something so I can, I'm joking, no more pandemics. But there's also one at the Martha Jefferson Neighborhood Association next week. I think it's important to watch all of them.
I've got singing in my head, dancing in another pandemic.
Right.
Oh, can I sing
now?
Is
for
this
Sean. We'll close on this. Ray Cadell for Sean. Just put the image of the finger trap.
I saw it,
that
yeah.
you're talking about. All right, we got to go.
It's an apt metaphor.
Good news on Green, though. You're making progress on broadband.
Greene County is
That's
making
important
progress.
That's what they're at. The same guy who called you Mr. Williamson wants to know.
Greene County is making progress. They actually had a little bit of a hiccup. They couldn't move forward with something late last year because they didn't have a project that was shovel ready. Some of those American recovery funds are going to be going to that. The supervisor, Herring, out there is really driving that bus, and I'm encouraged by all of the localities' attention to broadband. It has been a big issue, and I think the pandemic certainly exacerbated the issue, and they're spending the money to get the job done.
One little plug for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. We have a roundtable at every meeting, and we literally, other than these two gentlemen, never have any public there. And during these roundtables, there's a half an hour or two-way conversation, and that's where Dale started talking about the details. And if you watch them, even in the evergreen space, please watch them. There's some great information that goes back and forth on this.
I was also supposed to pass this along to you. Your buddy Peter Krebs is coming on at 12:30.
Oh, good.
And is it Allie? Allie from the PEC? I'm drawing a blank here. Maybe joining us as well.
Just real quick, go back to Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. You can also read Charlottesville Community Engagement, because I do routinely capture what happens at those meetings, but again, I'm a week behind. So if you want to know what happened last week, that's why I don't like to call what I'm doing news, because I'm definitely clearly saying that I sometimes have to take a couple days. It's information, but those meetings are very important, and you can get involved with them at any level should you choose. And
I usually
hope
send
you do.
him a text and say, "I didn't say that, Sean." And he goes, "Yes, you did. Look at the tape."
All right, so we're
that
out of
has
here.
happened.
You were awesome.
Thank
You were
you, guys.
awesome.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Happy belated birthday to you.
Is that it? Are we done?
We're done. We went considerably over
Can I-
30 minutes. This is the longest show we've ever done.
last-
Bill, we did cover this. He said we didn't hear enough about the proposed rezoning in Charlottesville.
It's a comprehensive. Are we still on?
Are we still on?
Yeah, it's a comprehensive plan, and find me, and I'll be happy to try to explain any of
We
it
can
to
drop
you.
them in the links in the
Yeah,
feed, right?
we
Yeah.
can drop the links in the feed. All right, we're out of here. Keith Smith, Shaw Tubbs, Neil
But you have
Williamson.
plenty of time. I think it's just a crucial. It's like there's plenty of time for that discussion. There's no decision point for at least 2 months.
Voice of reason.
Judah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Judah.
Thank you.
This is Real Talk, guys, on the I Love CVille Network. We'll see you on the I Love CVille show in about 45 minutes. Take care.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That was fun. I like it.
Yeah, this was fun.
No, I'm serious. Let's make this once a month roundtable.
I'll be happy to. Sean, you did a hell of